Now, rent control. The name speaks for itself, right? Everybody knows what rent control is. It basically means that landlords cannot charge rent above a certain amount year over year so that it doesn't price out people of varying incomes, particularly low income people, right? There are certain states that have rent controls in place for people who are lower income. Some states do not. States like mine in Florida, it's basically illegal to rent control. Essentially illegal. So, yes, feel sorry for me. Become a patron on my Patreon because it's rough out here. But yes, as far as that's concerned, it is, ugh, it's horrible. Well, I'll get to the necessity of landlords in a second. You guys already know where I stand on that. But as far as rent control, it is definitely at risk. So I am going to share. I think that's why. What is that up? Get down. Okay. Let me share this article first, because this is absolutely asinine. So this has to do this. I'm telling you guys, this is going to be. It's kind of scary. It's kind of spooky. But this is why we need to get out in the streets, basically. It says landlords are pushing the Supreme Court to end rent control. Let's get into it. It says 2 landlord lobbying groups are petitioning the Supreme Court to overturn New York City's rent stabilization law, which would allow further countrywide challenges to rent control. Real estate billionaires friendly with the court justices are backing the move. So this reminds me of a story that I talked about a few months ago that some of you guys may remember. And I'll also share that with you too, because it goes in line with this. So it says, as the national housing crisis deepens, corporate lobbyists and conservative groups with ties to 2 Supreme Court justices, billionaire benefactors, are pushing the court to let landlords hike rents. That's right. So now they're trying to make it so that they can hike rents nationwide. Look, nationwide ain't on your side. Let me tell you right now, this is exactly what they're trying to do, because they really do not want anybody to be able to afford rent. Well, okay. Yeah, they don't want you to afford rent. They want you to afford rent, but they don't want you to afford rent. They basically want you to be able to barely afford rent because they want all that money to themselves. So this is what's going on in this nation. It continues. It says, at issue is a petition from 2 landlord lobbying groups asking the High Court to overturn New York City's rent stabilization law, which has been on the books since 1969 and limits annual rent increases for more than 1 million units in the city, nearly half of all rentals. Now, this is talking about what's going on in New York City, but this is going to be a larger issue nationwide, because as the saying goes, so goes New York, so goes the rest of the country. It is also the same thing as, for instance, California. So goes California, so goes the rest of the country. So goes Massachusetts, so goes the rest of the country. And so a lot of times that's actually how it happens, is that it starts more statewide and then it expands, because if they can actually argue that in their eyes that rent control is unconstitutional, then guess what? Then other states who their governors and their state houses and their state senates, who are owned and in the pockets of the landlords or the real estate industrial complex, those who are in their pockets, then they will be more sympathetic to them And then they will see this and go, oh, snap, it's popping in New York because they were able to get rid of this. So we can get rid of this in our state. So therefore, we can actually make more profit. And so this can go nationwide. This can harm so many millions of Americans, particularly a whole third of us. This will affect not just adults, but it's going to affect our children too. Because if we don't have enough money to pay our rent, then that's going to increase the homelessness in this country. And it's already bad as it is. I say one homeless person in this country is too many. And we have technically over 500,000. I say technically because people aren't counting about the people who are sleeping in hotels and motels, the people who are sleeping on couches and having to double up in families. And so this is why this is such a major issue. All right, let's continue. It says Sam Stein, a housing policy analyst at the Community Service Society, an anti-poverty organization in New York, said that if the Supreme Court were to overturn the rent stabilization law, it is the end of New York City. Just pausing for effect. It says rents will go up significantly around the city. There will be a tremendous amount of displacement. You'll have a lot of people leaving New York City. You'll have a lot of homelessness. You'll have a lot of overcrowding. A high court ruling wouldn't just reshape New York, but would also pave the way for legal challenges to the dozens of rent control laws that exist around the country, and many more currently being considered. For example, in 2024, Californians will vote on a ballot measure to repeal the state's ban on rent control. Those of you out in California, pay attention. Pay attention, because the thing is that, and I understand, a lot of us look at voting and we see voting as just like, what's the point? And even if you feel that way, go just to vote on the ballot measures. You can leave everything else blank if you want, but vote on the ballot measures, right? Because sometimes it's not necessarily to vote in a system that you know is not going to benefit you. We all know that a lot of these politicians aren't going to benefit you. But when it comes to the ballot initiatives, sometimes voting on these things is a way to mitigate the damage to the poor and working people. So this is the point. So sometimes it is best to just go to the polls, skip the politicians, go to the ballot measures, and also research the ballot measures in your state so that you know what's coming up, so that you're not in a rush to research and go, oh my God, which one's going to be. Look at it now, right? Look at it now. See what's coming up in 2024 so that you know, okay, this is what they're trying to do. Am I going to vote yes or no on this? What are the details and why I should vote yes or no? Because sometimes they'll make these things more complex than what they really are. And so if you're in California, just know rent control is on the line in your state. So make sure to keep that in mind, all right? Because the thing is that they are, all the rich people out there in California are trying to get rid of it. They don't like that. A bunch of Reaganites trying to go, oh, well, it's really hurting my bottom line. Tell the landlord to shut the fuck up. When you talk about their bottom line, they shouldn't even give them a bottom line. Anywho, so that's the thing. Be sure to be aware of what's going on. Now, let's continue. It says at least one group petitioning the court to take the case has substantial ties to both Harlan Crow, remember that name, the GOP mega donor and Justice Clarence Thomas benefactor, and Paul Singer, the hedge fund billionaire who provided the undisclosed private jet flight to Justice Samuel Alito. Now, Harlan Crow, who, you guys remember this guy? Because this guy I talked about a few months ago. Now, I actually did a video on this. So let's go back and let's show who Harlan Crow is. I did a video called Caught, Clarence Thomas. right? And I had with me Rob Durden from the Indie News Network. Shout out to Indie News Network as well. And so we talked about Clarence Thomas and about the the vile man that he is. And so that's what we talked about. But we got into who Harlan Crow was and what he was doing in regards to Justice Clarence Thomas, just to refresh you guys' memory. The caption says, for over 20 years, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has been treated to luxury vacations by billionaire Republican donor Harlan Crow. And so it says he goes on cruises, far-flung locales on Crow's yacht, flies on his private jet, and keeps company with Crow's powerful friend at the billionaire's private resort. So says the extent of Crow's largesse has never been revealed until now. So it says Clarence Thomas and the billionaire. So this is credit to Joshua Kaplan, Justin Elliott, and Alex Mierzejewski. Chartered the plane and a 162-foot yacht himself. The total cost of the trip could have exceeded $500,000. Fortunately for him, that wasn't necessary. He was on vacation with a real estate magnate and Republican mega donor, Harlan Crow, who owned the jet and the yacht too. Are you surprised by any of this, Robert? Robert's not surprised. He's not. So basically, if you guys would like to, that video, I can put that in the description as well. I'm sorry, in the chat, so you guys can watch that later. But it actually talks about how Harlan Crow basically funded vacations for Justice Thomas. And of course, you guys saw about what Samuel Alito has been getting as far as free flights on private jets. So that's what's been going on. Now, let me go back to the article just so that we can continue. It says the petition to the right-wing court comes as the economic orthodoxy on rent control is shifting, with decades of economic data showing that limiting rent increases does not get in the way of new construction, as economists long argued. A broad coalition of economists, Senate Democrats, and tenants are calling on the Biden administration to regulate rents in units with government-backed mortgages. We all know that that's not really going to be, it's not going to happen. Says the challenge to New York's rent stabilization law was brought by two major New York landlord lobbying groups, the Rent Stabilization Association and the Community Housing Improvement Program. Do not let these names fool you. They will make it so that these names they sound pro-worker, pro-tenant. They have these really nice sound, just like how the government will do the same thing, right? It is not the same. Trust and believe. They will put these nice sounding names on these horrible bills, these horrible organizations. That's like giving the name Daisy to a mean, trained Rottweiler that is designed and trained to kill anybody and everybody on sight. Like, that's like giving the name Tinkerbell to a crocodile that's hungry. Like, oh my God, it's Tinkerbell. Next thing you know, you see this huge crocodile coming out. It's like, oh gosh, exactly. That's exactly what it's like. See, do not let the names fool you. Sarita said Cujo. Exactly. That's what's going on here. So, like I said, don't let the names fool you. Judge me by my size, do you? It says the two organizations spent a combined $4.7 million lobbying as they pushed to block the passage of a sweeping tenant protection law in 2019. The law, which expanded rent stabilization from just New York City to any locality in the state that chooses to opt in, made it more difficult for landlords to remove units from rent stabilization and added new protections to rent stabilized units. Just after the law passed, two groups sued the state, arguing that the new law in the New York City existing 1969 rent stabilization law are unconstitutional. What makes you think they're actually not going to do that here? So it says the petitioners for amnesty, Friends of the Court, who aren't CHIP or RSA, but weighed in with amicus briefs, argued that rent stabilization law constitutes an illegal seizure of property from landlords. Anyway, in violation of the Fifth Amendment's taking clause, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Look, this is why we got to get rid of private property anyway. Because that now make the Fifth Amendment, or we should change it from private to personal. So then personal property will still be allowed for public use, won't be taken away from public use, but private property shall no longer exist. Anyways, they also claim it violates the 14th Amendment's due process clause. It says, according to the RSA and CHIP petition, the law infringes upon landlords' right to exclude, occupy, use, change the use of, and dispose of their property. So this is really just like a giveaway to landlords. That's basically what this is. It's a massive giveaway. But what about tenants? What about us? Remember how this country was formed? Who were the people who the Constitution benefited? It was white male landowners. Even if you were white and male, if you didn't got no land, you didn't really benefit that much. And so property owners, like landlords, this is great for them. But for tenants, renters, people like us, you're screwed. So it says, in an amicus brief drafted by community groups representing tenants and homeless people, noted that the law allows landlords to decline to renew a lease with agency approval, allows landlords to recover an apartment for their personal use of the landlord or her immediate family upon showing of immediate and compelling necessity, and does not force landlords to offer vacant apartments for rent. Landlords are choosing to use their property as residential real estate, says Ellen Davidson, a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society who helped draft the community group's amicus brief opposing the petition. The government is not physically taking the property away from the landlord. So it's just like owning a gun, right? You can own a gun, but how you use that gun could either violate the law or you won't be violating the law, right? So basically, it's determining how they use the property, not that they can't have the property. And so they're trying to say, oh my God, they're taking possession of our property by making demands of what we can do with it. And it's like, yeah, But at the same time, if you have a car, you can't do exactly what you want just because you own that car on the road. Like, you have to abide by certain laws within the road in order to be able to use that car on a continuous basis. Same thing when it comes to renting to tenants. You can only do you can only do so much in regards to your tenants within the confines of the law. That's what rent stabilization is. And so if you don't have these protections in place, then that means that you're interfering with the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, basically, for many Americans. But they don't care about that. And so this is why they're trying to get rid of it by making the case saying, no, you guys are just trying to tell us what to do with our properties. Yeah, because if you did exactly what you wanted with your properties, then you'd be hurting people. If you did exactly what you want with your gun, you'd be hurting people. If you did exactly what you wanted with your car, you'd be hurting people. This is what that's what laws are for, right? That's the point. And the thing is that you guys are talking about, this is basically getting rid of regulation, because regulation stifles the economy. What happened with a billionaire and a dude that owned a submarine when he talked about going around regulations? They tried to go see the Titanic. What happened with that? You guys know what happened with? Oh yeah, crunch. That's what I love, Nestle Crunch. So that's what happens when you forego regulations. Somebody gets hurt. Somebody gets shafted. Somebody gets crushed. That's what rent stabilization is. That's what rent control is. It's basically regulation to prevent somebody from getting harmed. But they don't care about that because their eyes are bigger than their stomachs. Interesting. Now, friends of the court weigh in. So I'm not going to end up reading this entire article, but I just want to go over some points. Okay. Ties to Crow, that is Harlan Crow, a Texas real estate mogul, so of course he's going to be interested in this, are salient as Congress urges the Justice Department to investigate Thomas's alleged repeated violations of federal ethics laws, in part by accepting a series of undisclosed luxury gifts from Crow over the 2 decades. So remember, that's what I was talking about in that video that I showed you with me and Robert Durden, as we were discussing the links between Harlan Crow and Justice Clarence Thomas. Basically, there was a tie between them. And because this essentially has to deal with real estate, this is why it is so important to look at this case and see the potential damage it has, because someone like Harlan Crow could stand to make a lot of money off of overturning rent control for the entire country. And the fact that he has Justice Clarence Thomas in his pocket is very dangerous. And this is why, because Justice Clarence Thomas basically thumbed his nose at ethics codes within the Supreme Court, then now basically Harlan Crow continuously has his hand puppeting Clarence Thomas in the Supreme Court. And you have people like Alito also. And there's only 9 justices. And most of the justices are conservative. So goes Clarence Thomas, goes the rest of the conservative justices. And do not put your faith in the liberal justices, because a lot of liberals are also very kind to corporations as well as people who are in real estate especially real estate moguls and property owners. So this is why this is so dangerous. So it says in 2021, Thomas voted to overturn the federal C-19, I got to be careful how I say it, eviction moratorium. Crow's business later noted to investors that the eviction moratorium threatens their bottom line. See what I mean? Because they overturned the eviction moratorium due to the pandemic, that also helped Harlan Crow's bottom line. So if that moratorium being overturned positively affected Harlan Crow's bottom line and made him more money, then what do you think taking away rent control across the nation will also do for Harlan Crow's bottom line? He's a billionaire. Billionaire. And because he has Justice Thomas in his pocket, he gets more money, but you get homelessness. How is that fair? And for anybody who comes in and says, this isn't capitalism, this is just crony capitalism, or this isn't capitalism, this is just a monopoly, let me learn you something. In capitalism, it is a system that requires infinite growth on a planet with finite resources, right? Year over year, you have to grow, even if it's by like 0.5%, 0.75%, 1%. Growth has to happen, especially when it comes to the dividends that you have to pay to your investors, right? They have to have greater profits year over year. That being said, that growth happens in a few different ways. One, cutting costs. This can also mean cutting costs when it regards to safety and regulation, right? So they can cut corners that way. Another one is raising prices. That's another way that they can increase profits. A third way is by cutting costs through taking away benefits for employees, firing employees, things like that. So that's what it does. And then another fourth way is by absorbing other companies in order to take on more customers and to have more profit. So what happens when it absorbs other companies? That means there are less companies, which means it concentrates the amount of power that a company has. Meaning it gets down to when you have one company operating in an industry, or maybe a couple, that's when you get a monopoly. And that's what happens in capitalism. So capitalism leads to monopolization. Therefore, saying that, oh, it's not capitalism is wrong. Saying that capitalism and monopolies are not together, they're separate, is like saying potatoes don't turn into French fries. The thing is that it's all the same. It is all within the same frame, is all essentially part of the same thing. Potatoes, French fries, potatoes, potato chips, potatoes, au gratin, potato, home fries. It's all the same. It does not matter because it all originates from the same source. So saying it's not capitalism is cronyism, or it's not capitalism, it's monopoly, is crazy, because it's basically saying that, oh, that's not apples, it's apple pie. What? Are you kidding me? See the logic? So that's why When I say it's capitalism, that's because essentially that's what it is at its core, at its fundamental level. So I just want to put that out there for anybody who's like, well, it's cronyism. It's monopolization. Yes, that's what happens in capitalism. Look, if a cis man and cis woman, you know what I mean, and there ain't no pull-out game, the likelihood of a baby happening, well, pregnancy is pretty much going to happen. Same thing in capitalism. Sorry, I had to. But yeah, that's basically the thing, right? So, I mean, yeah, by the way, ketchup does belong on hash browns. I don't care what nobody says. It does. Anyway, but yes. Thank you, Pittsburgh dude. But let's continue on. I had to go over that rant really quick because it's like, come on now. Let's call a thing a thing. Now, this is something that we need to go over. Okay. The Manhattan Institute, a conservative think tank with financial ties to Crow and Singer, has used the court to take the rent stabilization case. Has urged the court to take the rent stabilization case. Says the extreme nature of the city's regulatory scheme calls for this court's intervention. That was a brief co-authored by Isla Shapiro, a senior fellow and the director of constitutional studies at the Manhattan Institute. Remember that name, the Manhattan Institute. Says Shapiro has been publicly defending Crow's gifts to Thomas as well as Singer's gift to Alito. So Isla Shapiro is basically saying it's not a bad thing that Harlan Crow is basically funding the vacations and some parts of Justice Thomas' life, even though that essentially affects Thomas's rulings on how he conducts himself regarding people in industries that Harlan Crow is involved in. So she's basically saying, it's not an issue. Bribery's not that big of a deal. That's basically what she's making a case for bribery. And she's with the Manhattan Institute. The corruption of it all. Baby, the corruption. Now, here's the kicker. It says Crow's wife sits on the Manhattan Institute Board of Trustees. Singer, who has donated millions to Manhattan Institute, is the organization's chairman. Says the National Multifamily Housing Council, a national landlord lobbying group with close ties to Crow's real estate companies, Crow Holdings, has previously filed a brief in favor of Chip and RSA at the federal circuit court level, but has not filed a new one with the Supreme Court. What do they have to do? They don't even really need to. All he has to do is call his buddy Clarence Thomas. Hey, Clarence, I need y'all to see this case. And, it would be beneficial to many of us Americans. It would be beneficial to Americans like me and many other people. And then we can continuously to be job creators. This will benefit our economy. It'll grow our GDP, right? He'll say some bullshit like that. And then next thing you know, oh, yeah, we'll definitely hear that case. And then who are they going to rule for? Oh, the job creators, the people that drive up our GDP, like the landlords and the real estate moguls. So they already got them in their pocket. So this is what's going on. So here's the point. It says major real estate and corporate lobbying groups are urging the High Court to hear the case, including the California Business Roundtable, the Real Estate Board of New York, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and the National Apartment Association. This is going to hurt a lot of people. This is going to put a lot of people in harm's way. Let me put this link in the chat so you guys can have access to this and share it among all the people who especially are tenants. Share it amongst yourselves, share it amongst your tenants, your fellow tenants. I also have a quick video that I want to share and comment on, because this is deeply important, because over a third of the nation rents. Actually, let me take this down too, so that won't get in my way. All right. Yeah. Okay. So if you guys have not already, I encourage all of you to subscribe to More Perfect Union's YouTube channel, because they put out great videos basically by and for workers. So let's go and examine this.
The housing market is a catastrophe.
Record rental prices across the United States.
And something's got to give.
Living in America is freaking ridiculous right now.
I can't afford any of these apartments.
$1,800 for a one-bedroom apartment.
$1,400 for 485 square feet.
I guess I just live in my truck.
Over a third of Americans are renters, and if you're in that category, you probably don't need to be told that the rental market is out of control. The question is, can anything actually be done about it? A historic wave of tenant organizing, unlike anything we've seen in decades, has found one answer: national rent control.
The tenant movement is absolutely within striking distance of rent regulation at the national level.
But it's not just tenants who are organized. This is also a story about how some of America's biggest landlords, banks, and private equity firms are hiding behind innocent-sounding front groups, all while pooling high. All while pooling their to keep your rent high. And private equity firms are hiding behind innocent-sounding front groups.
My bad. So you see that? It says National Multifamily Housing Council. What were you just looking at in that article? Some innocuous sounding name, National Multifamily Housing Council Incorporated. See that incorporate? That's the mark of the beast. Whenever you see incorporate, that's the mark of the beast, baby. Don't let them fool you. They have to put that there by law. Good Lord. Let me continue.
All while pooling their money to keep your rent high.
I moved into Waldo Heights in 2018. So I've been here 5 years now. And every year since I've been here, my rent has increased.
That happened to me, basically. The only year that it didn't was because in 2020 was because of the pandemic. And I guess they were feeling kind of generous. They were like, well, we're not going to increase it this year because it's going to be hard on people. So we're not going to increase your rent. When in reality, it shouldn't have increased because my rent increased 25%. You see, I think it increased 25% by 2021. I think they went another like 35% the year afterwards. Yeah, that much. That high. Mind you, I'm disabled and on disability. My mother is elderly and on Social Security. That's it. This is why I have a GoFundMe, just to help me with my daily bills because I just can't make it. So the thing is that this is what we're going through, and yet my rent still keeps going up, and I'm struggling. And many of you are struggling too, and the rents keep going up. Let me continue.
Every time my rent is raised, I'm at a crossroads of being evicted.
Millions of renters like Val are trapped in a rental market that's built to empower abusive landlords who can raise rents each year while allowing conditions to get worse and worse.
The mice, the roach infestations, sometimes they don't pick up our garbage. When I first moved here, I was told that the security gate was going to be fixed. The gate is still not fixed. And so people come in and they sleep in our hallways. I'm afraid sometimes to come in my building at night. My landlord is Landmark Realty, corporation based in California. They don't care. They just don't care.
Since the last financial crisis, rental units are increasingly owned and operated by corporations like Landmark that are accountable, first and foremost, to their private investors. For tenants like Val, legal protections against abusive landlords are often limited. But she discovered one powerful way to fight back.
So me and my neighbor, my best friend down the hall from me, we just said one day, she was like, let's call KC Tenants. And I said, okay. So I called and I left a message on the hotline. And a couple of days later, I got a phone call back.
A group called KC Tenants were fighting to stop eviction hearings at the Jackson County Courthouse.
Evictions will kill.
So, does that name sound familiar to any of you? I hope it does, because KC Tenants also is partnering with Nick of RBN, and Nick tries to, do things with KC Tenants within his area in order to help people who are renters. So shout out to KC Tenants. They're doing the damn thing out there to help people. And I'm trying to look for associations here in Orlando. I think I found one. I think it's Tenant Power. I think that's their name. So I'm going to try to get with them to have them on my channel in order to talk about what they're doing. But shout out to KC Tenants, man. They're doing the damn thing, helping people who are renters. All right, let's continue.
People like me.
Charged crowd packed City Hall for more than 3 hours. The yellow shirts in the room are tenants, each with their own personal story.
In a national housing crisis where rent inflation has vastly outpaced income growth, groups like KC Tenants have given their members power to take on their landlords.
We have written and passed a tenant's bill of rights. We've won free lawyers for every tenant facing eviction. We've organized buildings and neighborhoods. And just recently, we elected 4 members of city council.
And that movement seems to be growing.
Places like Louisville, Kentucky, Bozeman, Montana, Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
The current surge in tenant organizing is the most significant since the 1970s, and it's allowing renters to fight for the kind of big relief that only the federal government can enact.
There are millions of tenants across the country being squeezed by landlords like Landmark, and our federal government is bending act.
That's right.
We can fight back by winning rent control for everyone at Waldo Heights and for tenants.
Now, just to let you guys know, this is why people like Shama Sawant is so effective, because Shama Sawant actually, worked to pass rent control in Seattle, and when she was city councilwoman of Seattle city government. So this is why it is important. Now, I know that some people don't believe in voting anymore, but when it comes to people, voting in people like Shama Sawant, she was able to, help out, as far as on the city level, on the municipal level, in order to make lives for the working and poor people just a little bit easier. And so this is why, in addition to voting for ballot initiatives, if you vote locally, especially for city council and mayor, and they are for things like rent control and giving power to tenants and renters, then it would be worth it to actually look into their policies, give a full, look over their policies. But if they're actually fighting for people that are working, then, you can take a look at them. I prefer, to just look at people who are nonpartisan at all, no party affiliation, or third party or independents. And if they are ones who basically are for tenant power or renter power, then give them a look. See if they actually go in the direction that you think that they should be going in as somebody who is a manager of city government. So go ahead and take, keep that in mind as well. Even if you don't want to vote for anybody nationally, you also have local as well, which directly affects your life.
When Landmark Realty secured a mortgage for Val's building in 2014, their loan was actually backed by the federal government. Corporate landlords like Landmark often benefit from lucrative loans through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, government-sponsored enterprises that purchase mortgages from banks and set terms for them. With 1 in 4 apartment units across the country financed in this way, the government is essentially in business with our landlords. But that may be just the leverage that renters need.
We want to see every dollar of federal financing conditioned on a set of tenant protections.
So I want to go to this point here, because this goes into a little bit deeper about the National Multifamily Housing Council.
Spend millions lobbying Congress and federal agencies to oppose rent control. Since the start of last year, the NMHC has spent almost $10 million lobbying against it. The NMHC's members include major banks, private equity firms, and some of America's most notorious corporate landlords, like Greystar, Avalon Bay, and Blackstone.
So it's not to be confused with BlackRock. BlackRock and Blackstone are actually, they have some relation to each other, but Blackstone is basically a private equity firm. And this is one of the ways in which a lot of us are experiencing price hikes and inflation within the country. I put inflation in air quotes because in reality, it's really just price gouging, right? And so these private equity firms, what they do is that they increase the prices just so that they can make more profit. It's not that they actually need to increase it because, their workers aren't making enough. No, they don't care about the workers not making enough. They just want to increase the amount of money that their shareholders get. And so it's basically like, well, we can raise the price of food. What are they going to do? They need the food. They can't do without it. They can't survive without it. So we're just going to increase the price of food. Basically, any industry where it requires us to live, that's where they're going to be the most abusive with. So what have we experienced? Housing, food, healthcare, things like that, right? So because they have this control over the private equity, and what they do is they just increase the price, even fuel, they'll increase the price like crazy because they know that we can't operate without it. And so because we can't operate without it, we're forced to have to pay for it. You're forced. I'm forced. If you don't own your own home, they can increase the rent exponentially, and you're screwed, because if you don't have it, then guess what? You have to pay. You have to pay by living out in the streets. And it's not just rent from us, homes. Think about all the small businesses that are renting their units, and how, let's say you operate out of an office, out of a parcel in a mini mart, a strip mall. And you have to pay your rent to that strip mall so that you can operate in that area. Well, you're a one-person operation and you own the means of production yourself, and you're trying to make your profit for yourself, but more of that profit ends up having to go to your operation costs, because guess what? These landlords for commercial properties are also increasing your rent. So therefore, you're now struggling even as a small business owner. And you don't even have employees. Never mind the fact that I agree with having a co-op, but even if you're a co-op, you and your fellow co-owners, co-worker owners, they will have to do with less. So let me continue.
Blackstone is the world's largest private equity firm, and by some accounts, the largest landlord in the US. In recent years, private equity firms like Blackstone have increasingly been buying up housing assets, often with lucrative loans backed by Fannie and Freddie. Tenants have complained of rent hikes, evictions, and faceless corporate landlords unresponsive to repairs. The UN even accused Blackstone of worsening the global housing crisis by buying up.
The UN! Holy crap! The UN! The UN accuses Blackstone Group of contributing to global housing crisis? And yet they're allowed to stay and keep doing what they're doing? And then, well, you have Blackstone over here contributing to the housing crisis and making us to a nation of renters and increasing rent so high that we can't live, right? You have Blackstone. Over here, you have BlackRock that basically owns everything when it comes to funding our lives. Whether it's the food that we buy, the clothes that we wear, our healthcare, and all these other different entities that we need to survive just to live. You have BlackRock owning all this, and then Blackstone owning our homes. You live in the United Corporations of America. That's where you live. You don't live in any state. It's a corporation. Wicked shit, I'm telling you, man.
Buying up properties and hiking rents across the world. Meanwhile, Blackstone CEO Stephen Schwarzman earned $1.3 billion last year.
You already know. Guillotines.
For private equity firms like Blackstone, membership in lobbying groups is a way to protect their profits against threats like the current push for rent control. A 2023 lobbying disclosure shows the NMHC has been lobbying the Biden administration against rent control, and the FHFA.
So you know Joe Biden's not going to be behind it. You know he's not. Everybody and their mama knows that Joe Biden's not going to stand behind this. So here's the thing. I don't care if you say, oh my goodness, well, we're the Democratic Party and we're for the workers. No, you're not, because look, Joe Biden's not for the workers. He haven't been. Look, ask somebody that works for a railroad company if Joe Biden's actually for the workers. I'll wait. Number one. Number two, they're already lobbying Biden already because they know Biden's on their side. They know. So, guess what? They have Joe Biden in their pocket. They have the Supreme Court in their pocket. What makes you think they're actually going to make sure this gets stopped? I'll be honest with you. I honestly would love to see all of us just stop paying rent completely. Just like don't pay rent. Like September's rent, we all just put our money in escrow. We all just put our money in escrow and go, you know what? No, we're not paying. We got the money, but we're not paying you. We want to reset. Everybody's rent gets dropped by 50%. Everybody's. Because this is crazy, man. This is wicked. Doesn't matter what party you think. You can think the Republican Party is behind you all you want. Guess what? They are even more enthusiastic about their partnership with companies like Blackstone than even what the Democrats are. And they're cool with them. And please do not think somebody like Donald Trump is going to be establishment. Donald Trump came up in real estate, bruh. That's who he is. You don't think he's not going to allow these people to actually do the same thing? He's buddy with these people. I want everybody who's watching, if you're a conservative, and by the way, if you are, welcome. Let's have a conversation. If you are a conservative, I want you to look at somebody like Donald Trump and see him the same as you see Joe Biden. They're not different, bro. They're not. They don't even have to lobby for somebody like Trump because they know he's already in their pocket. Let's continue.
FHFA's oversight of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And it's not hard to guess what their lobbyists are saying in those meetings.
No, we just had a team of people go into the NMHC offices. We did a meeting with their government affairs director. Cindy told us this is just a problem of housing supply.
That's a common argument from industry lobbyists, that if rent control limits developers' potential for profit, they just won't build as much housing. There's no question we need to build way more housing. And there are...
Now, this is the part where I actually disagree. We don't need to build more housing. We don't. There's over 16 million vacant homes in the United States. 16 million. Even if half of that 16 million vacant homes, let's say 8 million, are not viable for occupancy, you still have another 8 million homes that are viable for occupancy. And then the other 8 million, you could literally have government funds make it so that those homes are now available for occupancy. We don't need more affordable housing. We just need to make the housing we already have affordable. In fact, to go even further, housing should be a right. Point blank period. Like, what are you doing saying that, oh, well, we're just going to have housing, paywall? And then you got people who have multiple homes. One person, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 homes. While there are people sleeping on the streets or sleeping on your couch with none. Is that fair? Don't come at me with life's not fair. Well, life's not fair. No. It may not be fair, but why are you participating in making it even less fair? So yeah, that's what's going on. That's a wonderful video by More Perfect Union. Go ahead and give them a sub and share their videos as well, because that, it's crazy, how people will say, well, that's just the nature of the business. No, you can change the nature of the business. And just to put a finer point on it, and shout out to Roger Meadows for sharing this with me, you have the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And this is what you guys need to see. How much do you need to earn to afford a modest apartment in your state? Right? Hourly wage required to afford a 2-bedroom rental home by state. Now, I've shown this many times, and I'm going to keep showing it. In places like Florida, you need to make, in my state, you need to make $30.59 an hour in order to afford a 2-bedroom rental. That means you need to work 111 hours a week in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Florida. 111 hours a week. Which is ridiculous. Fair market rent for a 1-bedroom is $1,312. 2-bedroom fair market is $1,591 a month. So that's just in my state of Florida. But many of you, look, Louisiana, you need to make $19.39 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom, right? That you had to work 107 hours a week. I'm not even going to go to the big states. Look at Illinois, $24.59 an hour. You have to work 76 hours a week. Ohio, $19.09 an hour just to afford a 2-bedroom rental. You have to work 76 hours a week on their minimum wage. North Carolina, $21.54 an hour. This is not sustainable. It's not. I have friends in Iowa. This is one of the cheapest. You need to make $18.13 an hour, but you have to work 100 hours a week in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment there. So when people talk about, well, that's just the nature of the business. And then a lot of the people who can't afford it, they did all the right things. They went to college. They got a career. But now it's no longer, well, all you have to do is work hard. Then it changed from just work hard to just work hard and go to college. Then it went to just work hard, go to college, and get into the right industry. Then it went to just work hard, go to college, get into the right industry, and come up with a great idea. Now it's, you're fucked. That's basically what it is. Because the thing is like, we were told, like, my grandparents' generation were told just work hard. My parents' generation was just work hard, go to college. My generation was just work hard, go to college, and get into the right industry. Because then they'll be like, oh my God, you got a liberal arts degree. You went to college and you got a liberal arts degree. No wonder why you're poor. But you went to college. but you didn't get the right industry. Sorry. Then you went to college, went into the right industry. Let's say you learned the code, but now you're out of a job because AI is taking your job. So now what? Oh, you got to come up with a great idea. Not everybody is an idea person. See how they move the goalposts further and further away? That's the system. They'll make it seem like, oh my God, all you have to do is work hard. That ain't true, boo. Because if that was the case, then my ancestors would be billionaires by now. They would have made, I would have been a trust fund baby. The Fauntleroys would have been trust fund babies. I'd be made in the shit. You wouldn't even see me here. But no, because meritocracy is a myth. It's a myth. Anyway,